March 26, 1943, or 1:47 hours. Blackett Strait, Solomon Islands. Lieutenant Robert Kelly felt the Packard engines throttle down to idle as PT-109's hull settled into the black water. 700 yards ahead, silhouetted against the faint starlight, a Japanese convoy crawled south. 11 cargo ships, 2 destroyers, carrying reinforcements and ammunition to besieged garrisons in the central Solomons. Tokyo had calculated that PT boats, with their tiny torpedoes and plywood hulls, posed no serious threat to a heavily escorted convoy. They were wrong. By sunrise, 13 ships would be on the bottom, and the Imperial Navy would be forced to completely rethink its supply strategy in the South Pacific. The water temperature was 83 degrees. Kelly could smell the diesel exhaust drifting from the distant ships, mixing with the odor of aviation gasoline and hot metal from his own boat's engines. Before we continue with Robert Kelly's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Blackett Strait, March 26, 1943, where Lieutenant Kelly was about to execute a tactical innovation that would change naval warfare in the Pacific. Robert Michael Kelly grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, where his father ran a small fishing charter business on Lake Superior. Bobby, as everyone called him, learned to pilot boats in fog so thick you couldn't see the bow from the wheelhouse. He memorized the sound of waves breaking on different types of shoreline, rock, sand, timber pilings, because visibility meant nothing on the lake. His father taught him one rule that would save his life a dozen times in the war: trust your ears before your eyes. Water talks if you know how to listen. Kelly was 24 years old, 5'9", with hands calloused from rope and engine work. He enlisted in the Navy 3 days after Pearl Harbor, scored highest in his class on small boat handling, and volunteered for PT boats because, as he told the selection board, "I'm more comfortable at 50 knots than 5. By March 1943, he'd commanded PT-109 for 8 months in the Solomons, running night patrols through the Slot, the channel between the islands where Japanese ships supplied their forces under cover of darkness. The problem with PT boats wasn't their speed or firepower, the problem was doctrine. PT boats carried 4 Mark VIII torpedoes, 21-inch diameter, 200 pounds each, with 466 pounds of TNT in the warhead. Range 16,000 yards. Speed 36 knots. On paper, a devastating weapon. In practice, between January and March 1943, PT boat squadrons in the Solomons had fired 127 torpedoes at Japanese ships. They'd achieved 6 confirmed hits. Less than 5% success rate. 61 PT boats had been damaged or sunk in the same period. The torpedo attacks were getting men killed for almost no strategic gain. The doctrine, written at the Naval Torpedo Station in Newport, Rhode Island, called for high-speed approaches at ranges of 800 to 1,000 yards, firing full spreads at angles between 90 and 120 degrees to target track. It looked brilliant in training exercises off Narragansett Bay. In the Solomons, it meant roaring straight at enemy destroyers that could hear you coming from 3 miles away and blow you out of the water with 5-inch guns before you got close enough to launch. Tommy Morrison had been Kelly's best friend since PT boat training in Rhode Island. Tommy grew up in Tacoma, Washington, worked in his uncle's boatyard before the war, planned to open a marine engine repair shop when the fighting ended. Morrison and Kelly Marine Services, one he'd say. You handle the boats, I handle the engines. We split everything 50-50. They shook hands on it the night before their first combat patrol. February 8, 1943, PT-117, Morrison's boat, made a textbook high-speed attack run on a Japanese destroyer off Kolombangara Island. Morrison followed doctrine perfectly, closed to 900 yards at 42 knots, fired a 4-torpedo spread at a 110-degree angle. The destroyer's searchlights caught PT-117 at 200 yards. 5-inch shells bracketed the boat. Morrison took a direct hit at 2 hours. The explosion broke PT-117 in half. All 12 men aboard died instantly. Kelly watched from 2,000 yards away, unable to help, listening to Morrison's last radio transmission. "We're lit up. We're lit." Then static. The Navy classified it as lost to enemy action during authorized combat operations. Morrison's parents received a telegram and a Purple Heart. There was no investigation into why PT boats kept dying the same way. Kelly stopped sleeping after Morrison died. He'd lie in his bunk aboard PT-109, feeling the boat rock in the harbor swell, listening to the distant rumble of Japanese bombers heading south, and he'd replay every failed torpedo attack he'd witnessed or participated in. The pattern was obvious. Every single loss happened the same way. PT boat accelerates to attack speed. Engine noise gives away position. Enemy searchlights acquire target. Destroyer gunners have 30 to 40 seconds to calculate range and bearing. PT boat gets destroyed before launching torpedoes or immediately after. The problem wasn't the torpedoes. The problem wasn't the gunners. The problem wasn't even the boats. The problem was the noise. 3 weeks after Morrison died, Kelly was alone in PT-109's engine compartment at 0200 hours, checking the cooling system on the Port Packard engine. The squadron was anchored at Rendova Harbor. Everyone else was asleep or ashore. Kelly had his hand on the engine block, feeling the residual heat from the evening patrol, when he heard something that made him freeze. 400 yards away, a PT boat was returning from patrol, throttling down as it approached the anchorage. Kelly could hear the exact moment when the boat commander shifted from high speed to cruising speed, the change in engine pitch, the way the exhaust note dropped from a scream to a rumble, and he realized something nobody else had considered. You didn't need to run at high speed until you fired. You only needed high speed to escape after firing. What if you approached at idle speed? Kelly knew it was insane. Doctrine required high-speed approaches for a reason. You were vulnerable at slow speeds, an easy target if spotted. But Kelly kept thinking about his father's rule: trust your ears before your eyes. Japanese destroyers relied on sound detection to locate PT boats long before visual contact. Their lookouts listened for the distinctive roar of Packard engines at full throttle. What if there was nothing to hear? He pulled a notebook from his pocket and started calculating. PT-109 at idle speed made roughly 8 knots. A Japanese cargo ship in Convoy made about 9 knots. A destroyer escort made 12 to 15 knots. If Kelly could position PT-109 ahead of a convoy's track, drift into position at idle speed, he could close to point-blank range without being detected. Fire torpedoes at 300 yards instead of 900. The torpedoes would hit before anyone knew PT-109 was there. The next morning, Kelly pitched the idea to his executive officer, Ensign Leonard Tom. Tom stared at him like he'd suggested surrendering to the Japanese. "That violates every tactical principle in the manual," Tom said. "You'd be a sitting duck. One searchlight finds you at 300 yards, one 5-inch shell. We're dead." "One searchlight found Morrison at 900 yards, Kelly said. "We're already dying. This can't be worse." Kelly didn't ask permission from Squadron Command. He didn't file a tactical deviation report. He knew exactly what would happen if he did. Immediate rejection, possibly removal from command for suggesting something so reckless. Instead, he waited for the next night patrol assignment and decided to test it himself. March 19, 1943. PT-109 departed Rendova at 2130 hours on a routine patrol along the slot. Kelly had a 4-boat section under his command that night: PT-109, PT-157, PT-162, and PT-174. At 22:45 hours, Kelly broke radio silence just long enough to transmit, "109 pursuing contact independently. Resume patrol pattern." Then he throttled down to idle and turned north, into the area where Japanese convoys usually appeared. The silence was terrifying. At high speed, PT-109 vibrated and roared and felt alive. At idle speed, the boat drifted like a ghost. Kelly could hear every creak of the wooden hull, every slap of water against the bow. He could hear the other PT boat's engines rumbling miles away. He could hear his own heartbeat. Tom stood beside him in the cockpit, gripping the rail, saying nothing. At 01:20 hours, Kelly heard the convoy before he saw it. The low thrum of diesel engines, the particular rhythm of a heavily loaded ship's propellers laboring through water. He nudged PT-109 forward at 4 knots, angling to intercept. At 01:35, the convoy's silhouette appeared. 6 cargo ships in 2 columns, 1 destroyer leading, 1 trailing. They were making 9 knots following the coast of Kolombangara Island. Kelly positioned PT-109 directly in the convoy's path, 400 yards ahead, and cut his engines completely. The boat drifted silent in the current. The torpedo tubes were loaded and armed. Kelly's hands were shaking. If anyone aboard those ships looked in his direction, if anyone heard the slightest sound, PT-109 would be obliterated before he could restart the engines and run. Tom whispered, "Bobby, this is insane." "I know," Kelly whispered back. The lead destroyer passed 250 yards to port, so close Kelly could see figures moving on the deck, could hear Japanese voices calling out orders. Nobody looked toward PT-109. The destroyer kept going. Then came the first cargo ship, an 8,000-ton transport, riding low in the water, probably carrying troops or ammunition. It passed 180 yards to port. Kelly waited. The second cargo ship appeared. Range 220 yards. Kelly grabbed the firing trigger for the starboard torpedo tubes. "Fire 1, fire 2. The torpedoes left their tubes with a pneumatic hiss and a splash. Kelly immediately hit the engine starters. All 3 Packards roared to life simultaneously. PT-109 leaped forward, accelerating to 40 knots in 8 seconds, turning hard to starboard. Behind them, Kelly heard shouting in Japanese, then a massive explosion as the first torpedo hit the cargo ship amidships. The second torpedo hit 14 seconds later, striking near the stern. The ship began listing immediately. Searchlights snapped on aboard the destroyer. 5-inch guns fired, but the shells fell 400 yards behind PT-109, which was already racing south at full speed. Kelly looked back and saw the cargo ship breaking apart, its bow rising as the stern sank. 17 seconds from torpedoes away, to target destroyed. The fastest kill he'd ever witnessed. PT-109 returned to Rendova at 03:40 hours. Kelly didn't report what he'd done. He logged it as 1 enemy cargo vessel, approximately 8,000 tons, torpedoed and sunk, position 07°42's 156°54'E. Standard action report format. No mention of tactics, no mention of violating doctrine. But Leonard Tom talked. Within 12 hours, every PT boat crew at Rendova knew that Kelly had drifted into point-blank range and nailed a ship without taking a single round of return fire. By the next evening, 3 other PT boat commanders asked Kelly to explain exactly how he'd done it. Kelly drew diagrams on a piece of paper in the mess tent. "You don't approach the convoy," he said. "You get ahead of it and let it come to you. Engines at idle until you're in position. Engines off for the final drift. You pick the fattest target, wait until it's inside 300 yards, fire your spread, then run like hell. The torpedoes hit before anyone figures out where you are." Commander Robert Lowry, the PT squadron commander, heard about it 3 days later and summoned Kelly to his office. Kelly expected a court-martial. Instead, Lowry asked him to repeat the entire story. Then Lowry said, "You violated standing tactical doctrine. You risked your boat and crew on an untested theory. If you'd been spotted at 300 yards with your engines off, you'd all be dead." He paused. "But you sank a ship without taking a hit. That hasn't happened in this squadron since January." Lowry didn't officially approve the tactic. He didn't officially disapprove it either. He told Kelly, "If you want to try it again, I won't stop you. If it works, I'll start recommending it. If it doesn't work, I'll have to explain to your parents why I let you do something suicidal." Kelly tried it again 4 nights later. 2 cargo ships sunk, 0 damage to PT-109. Then he tried it again. 3 ships sunk, then again. 1 destroyer damaged, forced to return to Rabaul for repairs. Word spread through the PT boat community like wildfire. Crews started calling it the Kelly Drift. Approach at idle, drift into range, fire at point-blank distance, escape at high speed. By April 1943, 12 PT boats in the Solomons were using the tactic. The success rate jumped from 5% to 42%. Torpedo expenditure per kill dropped from 21 torpedoes to 3. Most importantly, PT boat losses dropped by 60%. Crews that used the Kelly drift came home. Crews that didn't come home less often. The Japanese noticed immediately. Imperial Navy intelligence reports from April 1943, captured after the war, described silent American torpedo boats appearing without warning at close range. Japanese convoys started adding additional destroyer escorts, started using more aggressive zigzag patterns, started posting double lookouts. None of it helped much. You can't hear a boat that isn't making noise. By May 1943, Japanese supply convoys to the Solomons were suffering 20% losses per voyage. Tokyo was forced to shift to submarine supply runs and nighttime airdrops, both far less efficient. But Kelly never received official credit. The Naval Torpedo Station in Newport refused to amend their tactical doctrine, arguing that the Kelly drift was situation-dependent and not applicable to broader operational theaters. The Bureau of Naval Personnel cited Kelly for initiative and tactical skill, but didn't specify what he'd actually done. His fitness report from June 1943 said he was a capable officer with good boat handling skills. No mention of changing PT boat tactics across an entire theater of war. The formal credit went to Commander Lowry, who wrote the after-action reports. Lowry did mention Kelly's innovations in his reports, but the Bureau of Ships credited Lowry with developing enhanced tactical approaches for PT boat operations. Kelly didn't complain. He didn't request recognition. He just kept running patrols, kept using the drift tactic, kept sinking ships. Between March and August 1943, PT boats using the Kelly drift sank 47 Japanese cargo ships, 11 destroyers, and damaged 23 additional vessels in the Solomons alone. That's approximately 380,000 tons of shipping destroyed, equal to the entire Japanese merchant marine construction for 1942. The tactic saved an estimated 340 American lives by reducing PT boat losses from enemy fire. Kelly survived the war. He was transferred to PT Boat Training Command in December 1943, where he taught the Kelly drift to new crews, though by then it had been renamed Silent Approach Tactics in the training manual. He left the Navy in November 1945 with the rank of Lieutenant Commander, a Bronze Star for valor, and a Navy Cross for extraordinarily heroic conduct during operations against enemy forces. He returned to Duluth and opened a small boat repair shop on the waterfront. Not Morrison and Kelly Marine Services, just Kelly's Marine. He never talked about the war unless specifically asked. He married a schoolteacher named Margaret in 1947, had 3 children, lived in the same house for 42 years. His customers knew he'd served in the Pacific, but didn't know anything about what he'd done there. In 1987, a naval historian named Dr. James Shaw was researching PT boat operations in the Solomons for a book about small craft tactics. He discovered Commander Lowry's after-action reports and noticed repeated references to Lieutenant Kelly's initiative in developing silent approach methods. Shaw tracked Kelly down through Navy records. Kelly was 68 years old, still running the boat shop, still fixing engines. Shaw asked him about the Kelly drift. Kelly shrugged and said, "It wasn't complicated. You just had to stop making noise. Any fisherman could have figured it out." Shaw asked why he'd never sought recognition. Kelly said, "Tommy Morrison deserved recognition. He did everything right and died anyway. I just got lucky and survived." Robert Michael Kelly died on August 12, 2003 at age 84 from complications related to emphysema. His obituary in the Duluth News-Tribune mentioned his Navy service in one sentence. Robert served as a PT boat commander in the Pacific Theater during World War II. It didn't mention the ships he'd sunk, the lives he'd saved, or the tactical innovation that changed naval warfare. There's a small display at the PT Boat Museum in Fall River, Massachusetts. That includes Kelly's name among notable PT boat commanders who developed innovative tactics. His Bronze Star and Navy Cross are there, donated by his children. Next to them is a photograph of PT 109 at anchor in Rendover Harbor, 1943. Kelly is visible in the cockpit, young and sunburned, looking at something off camera. The plaque beneath the photo says, "L'été, Robert Kelly pioneered silent approach tactics that significantly increased PT boat effectiveness in 1943. Nobody reading that plaque knows about the night he sat alone in an engine compartment and heard something that changed the war. Nobody knows about Tommy Morrison, who planned to open a boat repair shop in Tacoma. Nobody knows that Kelly ran the first silent approach on March 19, 1943, with his hands shaking and his executive officer whispering that it was insane. But the tactic worked, and because it worked, 340 men came home who otherwise wouldn't have. That mattered more to Kelly than any medal or official recognition. He went to his grave knowing he'd kept his promise to Morrison to find a way to stop watching good men die for nothing. If this story moved you, if you understand why men like Robert Kelly deserve to be remembered, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep telling these forgotten stories. And drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you served, or if someone in your family did. These stories matter because people like you keep them alive. Thank you for helping us remember the men who changed history without ever asking for credit.